The dust settled around her worn boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Sonora, California, clutching two wailing infants to her chest, her eyes scanning the bustling main street for any sign of mercy in a town that looked as harsh as the journey that had brought her here. Teresa Foster had traveled over 300 miles with her twin babies, and the September heat of 1878 felt like it might be the final straw that broke her already battered spirit. The babies, a boy and a girl just shy of 4 months old, cried in unison as if they understood the desperation of their situation. She had $20 to her name, no family to speak of, and a dead husband who had left her with nothing but these two precious lives and a whole lot of broken promises. The stagecoach driver handed down her single carpet bag without meeting her eyes, and she knew what he was thinking. A woman alone with twin babies in the Wild West was not a common sight, and it certainly was not one that inspired confidence. She had seen the same look on every face since leaving Sacramento after burying Robert 3 weeks ago. The cholera had taken him so fast, she barely had time to process being a widow before she became a desperate one. Teresa looked up and down the main street of Sonora. The town was bigger than she had expected, with wooden buildings lining both sides of the wide dirt road. She could see a general store, a saloon, what looked like a hotel, and further down, a church steeple rising above the other structures. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she felt sweat trickling down her back beneath her black mourning dress. One of the twins, her son Samuel, let out a particularly piercing wail, and she jostled him gently while trying to keep her daughter Sarah from sliding from her other arm. Her carpetbag sat in the dust at her feet, and she realized with a sinking feeling that she could not carry everything at once. She needed help, but everyone who passed by seemed determined to look anywhere but at her. She was about to sink down onto the bench outside the stage depot when a man on horseback rode up and dismounted in one smooth motion. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly at the edges beneath his worn hat, and when he looked at her, his brown eyes held something she had not seen in weeks: genuine concern. "Madam, you look like you could use a hand," he said, his voice deep and steady. He could not have been more than 25, just a few years older than her own 22 years. Teresa felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had cried enough over the past weeks. "I would be grateful for any assistance, sir. I need to find lodging, but as you can see, my hands are rather full." He bent down and picked up her carpetbag without being asked. "Name's Ben Vance. Folks call me Ben. I run a ranch about 5 miles outside of town." He looked at the crying babies with an expression that was hard to read. Not disgust, not pity, but something closer to understanding. "These little ones sound hungry." "They are always hungry," Teresa admitted, feeling her cheeks flush. "I am Teresa Foster. These are Samuel and Sarah. Their father passed away 3 weeks ago, and I have come here hoping to find work." Ben's expression softened even more. "Work with 2 babies. That is going to be difficult, Mrs. Foster." "I am aware of the challenges," she said, lifting her chin despite her exhaustion. "But I am not afraid of hard work, and I will do whatever it takes to provide for my children." Something shifted in Ben's eyes, a decision being made in real time. "The hotel is just down the street. Let me help you get settled there, and then we can talk about what options might be available." Teresa wanted to protest that she could not afford charity, but Samuel chose that moment to escalate his crying to a new level, and Sarah joined in with equal enthusiasm. She nodded gratefully and allowed Ben to lead the way down the wooden sidewalk. The hotel was cleaner than she had dared hope, and the woman behind the desk, A sturdy middle-aged lady with kind eyes took one look at the babies and immediately softened. "Poor dears. You look exhausted, honey. Ben, put her in room 6. It has got a nice window that catches the breeze." "Thank you," Teresa managed, bouncing both babies in a rhythm that usually soothed them but was failing spectacularly at the moment. Ben carried her bag up the narrow stairs and opened the door to a small but tidy room with a bed, a washstand, and a rocking chair by the window. He set the bag down carefully. "Mrs. Foster, I know we just met, but I have a proposition for you." Teresa felt her guard go up immediately. She had heard similar words before, and they never led anywhere respectable. "I am not that kind of woman, Mr. Vance." His ears turned red and he held up both hands. "No, madam, nothing like that. I apologize if I gave that impression. What I mean is, I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, passed away 2 months ago, and the place has been falling apart without her. I cannot cook to save my life, and the house is in such a state I am almost embarrassed to go home at night. I need someone to manage the household, and you need employment. It comes with room and board, and there is plenty of space for the babies." Teresa studied his face carefully, looking for any sign of deception. All she saw was earnestness and perhaps a touch of desperation that matched her own. "You would take on a woman with 2 infants. That seems like more trouble than it is worth." "I grew up in a big family," Ben said. 6 siblings, and I was right in the middle. Babies do not scare me. Besides, a house feels wrong when it is too quiet. Those little ones would liven things up considerably." Sarah had finally stopped crying and was looking at Ben with wide blue eyes, her tiny fist stuck in her mouth. Samuel was still fussing, but with less intensity. "I would need to keep them with me while I work," Teresa said cautiously. "I am still nursing them and they need constant attention." "Understood. Like I said, it is a big house. We can set up a nursery area wherever makes the most sense. And I am usually out working the ranch during the day, so you would have the run of the place." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncertain. "Look, I know this is unusual and you do not know me from Adam. I can give you references in town. Talk to Sheriff Morrison or Pastor Williams at the church. They have known me since I was born. I am offering honest work at honest pay, nothing more." Teresa looked down at her babies, then around the small hotel room. She had enough money for perhaps 3 nights of lodging, and then what? She had no prospects, no connections in this town, and winter would be coming in a few months. What choice did she really have? "How much are you offering?" she asked. $20 a month plus room and board for all 3 of you, Ben said. "And if you can get the house back in order and keep it that way, I would consider that worth 30. It was more than fair. It was generous, actually. Teresa felt suspicious of such generosity, but when she met Ben's eyes again, she saw only sincerity. "I would like to speak with those references you mentioned," she said finally. "If they vouch for you, then I accept your offer, Mr. Vance." Relief washed over his face. "Fair enough. The sheriff's office is just across the street. Pastor Williams should be at the church. I can take you around now if you would like, or you can rest first and we can do it in the morning." Samuel let out another cry, and Teresa felt the familiar sensation that meant she needed to nurse him soon. The morning would be better. These 2 need feeding and sleep, and truthfully, so do I. Ben nodded and moved toward the door. "I will come by after breakfast, say around 8. We can talk to the references, and if you are satisfied, we can head out to the ranch." "That sounds acceptable," Teresa said. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Mrs. Foster, I know you have been through a terrible loss. I am sorry about your husband. I lost my father 2 years ago and my mother just last year. I know grief, and I know how hard it is to keep going when everything feels impossible. But those babies need you, and you are clearly strong enough to do what needs to be done. I respect that." Before Teresa could respond, he tipped his hat and left, closing the door quietly behind him. She stood there for a long moment, Samuel still fussing in her arms, Sarah now sleeping peacefully, and wondered if she had just been offered a lifeline or was walking into a different kind of trouble. But as she settled into the rocking chair and began to nurse Samuel, she decided that she would take the chance. What other choice did she have? The alternative was ending up on the streets, and she would do anything to prevent that fate for her children. The morning came too quickly. Teresa had been up half the night with the twins, who seemed to take turns sleeping and crying. By the time dawn broke through the window, she felt like she had not slept at all. But she washed herself and the babies as best she could with the water from the pitcher, put on her other dress, which was only slightly less wrinkled than the one she had worn yesterday, and tried to make herself presentable. Ben arrived promptly at 8, looking fresh and well-rested in clean clothes. He had shaved, she noticed, and she wondered if he had done so on her account. The thought made her feel strange, a flutter in her stomach that she immediately dismissed. She was a widow. She had no business noticing how a man looked. "Morning, Mrs. Foster. How did the little one sleep?" he asked as they walked down the stairs to the hotel lobby. "About as well as can be expected," Teresa said diplomatically. "They are still adjusting to all the travel." They visited Sheriff Morrison first, a graying man with a weathered face and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything. When Ben explained the situation, the sheriff nodded slowly. "Ben's a good man, Mrs. Foster. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His father, Thomas Vance, was one of the best men I ever knew, and Ben takes after him. If he says he needs a housekeeper and will treat you proper, you can take that to the bank." Pastor Williams at the church was equally complimentary. "The Vance family has been part of this community for 20 years. Benjamin has run that ranch by himself since his mother passed, and he has done it with integrity. You and your children would be safe in his employ, Mrs. Foster. I can promise you that." With both references confirmed, Teresa felt her last reservations begin to ease. Ben borrowed a wagon from the livery stable, and they loaded her single bag along with a few supplies he insisted on purchasing from the general store. Extra blankets, some fabric that he said she could use for whatever the babies needed, and food staples that made her realize just how seriously he was taking his responsibility as an employer. The ride out to the ranch took about 45 minutes, following a well-worn road that cut through rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The landscape was beautiful in a stark, golden way, with the mountains visible in the distance and the sky stretching endlessly overhead. "The ranch has been in my family since 1858, Ben explained as they rode. "My father came out during the gold rush but was smart enough to realize that the real money was in supplying the miners, not in mining itself. He started running cattle and horses, and it grew from there. We have got about 200 head of cattle right now and a dozen horses. It is not the biggest operation, but it is steady." "You run it by yourself?" Teresa asked, adjusting Sarah in her arms as the wagon bounced over a rut. "I've got 2 ranch hands who come in during the day, Miguel and his son Carlos. They live in town. Miguel has worked for my father for 15 years. He is like family." Ben glanced at her. "They are good men too, in case you were worried about that." Teresa appreciated his thoughtfulness. "I admit I have been worried about many things, Mr. Vance. A woman alone has to be cautious. Call me Ben, please. And you are right to be cautious. But I give you my word that you and your children will be safe here. Anyone who works on my land knows how things are done. Respect or find work elsewhere." The ranch came into view as they crested a hill, and Teresa felt her breath catch. The house was larger than she had expected, a two-story structure with a wraparound porch and a stone chimney. It was surrounded by several outbuildings, a barn, a stable, what looked like a bunkhouse, and a few smaller structures she could not identify. Everything looked well maintained but definitely in need of a woman's touch, as Ben had said. Inside, the house was spacious but showed clear signs of neglect. Dust covered most surfaces, dishes were piled in the kitchen, and she could see cobwebs in the corners. But the bones of the house were good, with real glass windows, solid furniture, and a beautiful stone fireplace in the main room. "I know it looks bad," Ben said, sounding embarrassed as he showed her around. "I have been focused on keeping the ranch running, and the house has suffered for it." "It is nothing that cannot be fixed with some elbow grease," Teresa said, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. "This is a beautiful home, Ben. Your parents built something wonderful here." She saw the flash of sadness cross his face before he covered it. "They did. I just wish they were still here to see it continue." He showed her to a bedroom on the first floor that was larger than the one she had shared with Robert in Sacramento. It had a proper bed, a dresser, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the front yard. An adjoining smaller room would be perfect for the twins. "This was my parents' room," Ben said quietly. "I moved upstairs after my mother passed because I could not stand being in here, but it seems like the right place for you and the babies, close to the kitchen and the main living areas." Teresa wanted to protest, to say it was too much, but Samuel started crying and she knew she needed to get the babies settled. "It is perfect. Thank you, Ben." Over the next few days, Teresa threw herself into transforming the house. She worked from dawn until late into the evening, fitting her work around the constant needs of two 4-month-old babies. She scrubbed and dusted, organized and cleaned, cooked meals that were more elaborate than Ben's usual fare of beans and bacon, and slowly brought life back into the house. Ben, for his part, was true to his word. He worked outside during the day, coming in only for meals and to help with whatever heavy lifting or repairs were needed. He was patient when the babies cried during dinner, often taking one of them so Teresa could eat her own meal. He never complained when he found tiny baby clothes hanging to dry in the kitchen, or when he tripped over a basket of laundry in the hallway. Miguel and Carlos proved to be exactly as Ben had described. Respectful, hard-working men who greeted Teresa politely and always wiped their boots before coming into the kitchen for the lunches she prepared. Miguel's wife, Rosa, came by after the first week with a basket of vegetables from her garden and an offer to help watch the babies if Teresa ever needed a break. It was the first real kindness from another woman that Teresa had experienced since arriving in Sonora, and she found herself tearing up with gratitude. "This town takes care of its own," Rosa said, patting Teresa's hand. "And anyone who works for Ben is part of this community. He is a good man. You are lucky to have found him." Teresa was beginning to realize just how lucky she was. The work was hard, certainly, but she had a safe place to live, enough to eat, and an employer who treated her with respect and consideration. More than that, she was beginning to enjoy the rhythm of ranch life. The quiet mornings with coffee on the porch while the babies napped, the satisfaction of a clean house and a good meal prepared, the sound of Ben's voice as he talked to the horses in the barn. She was also beginning to notice things about Ben that she had no business noticing. The way his shoulders looked when he was working without his shirt on to fix the fence in the hot sun. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at Samuel and Sarah. The deep rumble of his laugh when something amused him. The gentle way he spoke, always thoughtful, always kind. One evening in early October, about 3 weeks after Teresa had arrived at the ranch, She was washing dishes after supper when Ben came into the kitchen with Sarah in his arms. The baby was fussing, and Teresa immediately reached for her, but Ben shook his head. "I have got her. You finish up. I think she just wanted someone to walk with her." He paced slowly around the kitchen, humming something tuneless, and Sarah settled almost immediately, her small head resting against his shoulder. Teresa watched them, her hands still in the dishwater, and felt something shift in her chest. It was not just gratitude anymore, though she felt plenty of that. It was something warmer, something that scared her because it felt too soon, too complicated, too much. "You are good with her," she said softly. Ben glanced over and their eyes met. "I told you, big family. My youngest sister was born when I was 10. I changed plenty of diapers and walked plenty of floors with crying babies. Still, not every man would be so willing to help with children that are not his own. They are part of my household now," Ben said simply. "That makes them my responsibility too." He paused, then added, "Besides, I have grown pretty fond of these little ones, and their mother is not bad company either." Teresa felt heat rise in her cheeks and she turned back to the dishes. "You are too kind, Ben. I am not being kind. I am being honest." He came closer, still holding Sarah, who was now sleeping peacefully. "Teresa, I know it has not been long, and I know you are still grieving your husband, but I want you to know that having you and the babies here has changed this house. It feels like a home again, not just a place to sleep between work. I am grateful you took a chance on my offer." "I am the one who should be grateful," Teresa said, drying her hands on a towel and turning to face him. "You saved us, Ben. I do not know what would have happened if you had not offered me this position. I was nearly out of money, and winter is coming. You gave us a chance when no one else would. Anyone else would have been a fool not to," Ben said firmly. "You are one of the hardest workers I have ever seen, and you are a wonderful mother besides. These twins are lucky to have you." Samuel chose that moment to start crying from the other room, and the spell was broken. Teresa hurried to get him, and Ben carried Sarah to the nursery. They moved around each other with the easy familiarity of people who had been doing this dance for years, not weeks, and Teresa realized that somewhere along the way, this had started to feel like more than just a job. November brought cooler weather and the first real hints of the approaching winter. Teresa had settled into her role so completely that it was hard to remember a time when she had not been part of the Vance ranch. The babies were thriving, growing chubby and alert, starting to smile and coo at the familiar faces around them. Samuel had developed a particular attachment to Ben, lighting up whenever he heard his voice, and Sarah loved to be carried around outside to watch the horses. Teresa had also made friends in town. Rosa visited regularly, and other women from the church had stopped by to welcome her. She was invited to quilting circles and Sunday dinners, and slowly, she was building a life that felt more stable than anything she had known with Robert, if she was being honest with herself. Her late husband had been a dreamer, always chasing the next big opportunity, never content with steady work. She had loved him, but it had been exhausting trying to build a life on shifting sand. With Ben, everything was solid and reliable. He did what he said he would do. He kept his promises. He showed up day after day, steady as the sun rising, and somewhere in all of that steadiness, Teresa had fallen in love with him. She did not mean to. She had told herself it was too soon, that she was being foolish, that she was confusing gratitude with something deeper. But the heart did not listen to such logical arguments. The heart only knew that when Ben walked into a room, everything felt brighter, that his smile made her pulse quicken, that she found herself thinking about him when she should be thinking about laundry or cooking or any number of other practical things. She thought she had been careful, had kept her feelings hidden. But Rosa saw right through her. "You love him," Rosa said one afternoon in late November when she had come by with her famous tamales. They were sitting at the kitchen table while the babies napped, and Teresa nearly choked on her coffee. "I do not know what you mean," Teresa said, feeling her face burn. Rosa laughed, not unkindly. "Teresa, I have eyes. The way you look at him when he comes in from working, the way you make sure his favorite dishes are on the table, the way you light up when he pays attention to the babies. You love him." Teresa looked down at her coffee cup. "It does not matter. I am his employee, and I am a widow with 2 children. He was just being kind, giving me this job. I cannot presume that he feels anything more than that." "Have you seen the way he looks at you?" Rosa asked gently. "That man is head over heels, Teresa. Everyone in town can see it. The way he talks about you and the babies when he comes into town. The way he rushes home now instead of lingering at the saloon with the other ranchers. He is in love with you too, you just have to open your eyes to see it." "Even if that were true," Teresa said slowly, "it is too soon. Robert has not been gone even 3 months. What would people think? People will think what they always think, but that should not stop you from finding happiness. You did not ask to be a widow, Teresa. Cholera took your husband, and that is a tragedy. But you are still alive, and so are those babies. You deserve to be happy, and if Ben makes you happy, then you should not let worry about what others might say stop you." Teresa wanted to believe Rosa, but fear held her back. Fear of being hurt again, fear of making a mistake, fear of presuming too much and losing this safe haven she had found. That evening, Ben came in from work with a package wrapped in brown paper. "I was in town today and picked something up," he said, handing it to Teresa with an almost shy expression. She unwrapped it carefully and found 2 small knitted caps, one blue and one pink, sized perfectly for the babies. "Ben, these are beautiful. You did not have to do this. I saw Mrs. Henderson selling them outside the general store, and I thought of Samuel and Sarah. Winter is coming on strong, and I wanted to make sure they would stay warm." He paused, then added, "I have been meaning to talk to you about something, Teresa." Her heart started to race. "What is it?" He gestured to the table, and they both sat down. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with his hat. "I want to be clear about something. When I hired you, it was because I genuinely needed help around the house. But over these past 2 months, it has become about more than that. You and Samuel and Sarah have become important to me, more important than I probably should admit." Teresa felt like she could not breathe. "Ben." He held up a hand. "Let me finish, please, before I lose my nerve. I know you are still grieving Robert, and I am not trying to replace him or rush you into anything. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond what an employer should feel for his employee. I care about you, Teresa, deeply. And I have come to love those babies like they were my own." Tears sprang to Teresa's eyes. "I thought I was imagining things. I thought I was being foolish." "You are not being foolish," Ben said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I understand if you need more time. I understand if you do not feel the same way. But I could not keep pretending that you were just my housekeeper when every time I look at you, I see the woman I want to spend my life with." Teresa let the tears fall freely now. "I do feel the same way, Ben. I have been trying to tell myself it was too soon, that I should not feel this way. But I cannot help it. You have been so good to me and the children. You have given us a home, a family, a future. How could I not fall in love with you?" The smile that broke across Ben's face was like sunrise. He stood up and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her carefully, as if she were something precious. "Our family just got bigger and better," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The day you arrived with those babies, I did not know it yet, but my life was about to change in the best possible way. Teresa buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, sunshine and leather and home. I was so scared that day. I did not know what was going to happen to us. And then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, until Samuel started crying from the nursery. They both laughed, and Ben kissed her forehead gently before releasing her. "I will get him. You have been on your feet all day." As Teresa watched him walk toward the nursery, she felt a peace settle over her that she had not experienced in longer than she could remember. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Teresa's life. She and Ben courted properly, despite living in the same house, which amused both of them. He took her on picnics when the weather allowed, bringing her wildflowers that he picked himself. They sat on the porch in the evenings after the babies were asleep, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and dreams. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's steady wisdom and his mother's gentle strength, about his siblings who had scattered to various parts of California and Oregon, building their own lives, about the loneliness of the past year, running the ranch alone, eating silent meals, sleeping in an empty house. She told him about her childhood in Boston, about her family who had disowned her when she married Robert against their wishes, about the years of following her husband from one failed venture to another, always hoping the next town would be the one where they finally settled, about the shock of his death and the terror of being alone with two babies and no way to support them. "I am sorry you had to go through all of that," Ben said one evening, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sun set. "But I cannot help being grateful that it brought you here to me." "I am grateful too," Teresa said, leaning into his warmth. "I never expected to find love again, especially not so soon, but this feels right, Ben. It feels like coming home." In February of 1879, 5 months after Teresa had first arrived in Sonora, Ben asked her to marry him. He did it properly, getting down on one knee in the parlor after the babies were asleep, presenting her with a ring that had belonged to his mother. "Teresa Foster, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Would you let me be a real father to Samuel and Sarah, and make this family we have built official in the eyes of God and man?" "Yes," Teresa said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in the church in Sonora on a beautiful day in March. Rosa stood up with Teresa, and Miguel stood with Ben. Samuel and Sarah, now nearly 9 months old, were passed around by various townspeople during the ceremony, their happy babbling adding a joyful chaos to the proceedings. Pastor Williams beamed as he pronounced them husband and wife. "I have known Ben his whole life, and I have never seen him happier than he has been these past months. Teresa, you and those babies have brought light back into his life. May God bless this union and this family." The whole town turned out for the celebration afterward, with tables of food set up in the churchyard, music from a fiddle player, and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Teresa danced with her new husband, feeling like she was floating, hardly able to believe that this was her life now. That night in the bedroom they now officially shared, Ben held her close and whispered, "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for giving me a family again. Thank you for saving us," Teresa whispered back, "for seeing us that day and deciding we were worth the trouble." "You were never trouble," Ben said firmly. "You were a blessing I did not know I needed." Life as Mrs. Benjamin Vance suited Teresa perfectly. She ran the household with efficiency and love, raising the twins with Ben's full participation and support. He was every bit the father to Samuel and Sarah that a biological parent could be, never treating them as anything less than his own children. The twins grew and thrived. Samuel was adventurous and bold, always getting into things, while Sarah was more cautious and thoughtful. Ben taught them to ride horses when they were barely old enough to walk, with Teresa watching nervously from the porch. He told them bedtime stories about their grandfather Vance and the early days of the ranch. He bandaged skinned knees and dried tears, and celebrated every small milestone with the enthusiasm of a man who had never expected to be a father and treasured every moment of it. In the summer of 1880, Teresa discovered she was pregnant. She had not been sure it was possible, given how difficult it had been to conceive the twins with Robert, but Ben's joy at the news erased any doubts she might have had about having another child. "Another baby," he kept saying, his hand on her still flat stomach, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have another baby. Are you happy?" Teresa asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ben said, pulling her close. "You and the twins have already given me more than I ever dreamed of having. Another child is just even more blessing heaped on top of blessings." Their son was born in March of 1881, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the entire household. They named him Thomas, after Ben's father, and little Tommy proved to be the perfect addition to their family. Samuel and Sarah, now 2.5 years old, were fascinated by their baby brother, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding time. Ben was absolutely besotted with Tommy, but he never treated him any differently than he treated Samuel and Sarah. All 3 children were equally his in his eyes, and he made sure they all knew it. Rosa, who had become one of Teresa's dearest friends, came by to help during those first weeks after Tommy's birth. "You have a beautiful family, Teresa," she said, watching Ben walk the floor with the baby while Teresa rested. "And that man loves you and those children more than anything in this world. You can see it in everything he does." "I know," Teresa said softly, watching her husband with their son. "I am the luckiest woman alive." The years passed in a happy blur of activity. The ranch prospered under Ben's management, and they added onto the house to give the growing children more space. Samuel proved to have his father's talent with horses, spending hours in the stable with Ben learning everything he could. Sarah developed a love of cooking and was often found in the kitchen with Teresa, learning to make bread and pies. Tommy was still young, but he was already showing signs of being the most mischievous of the 3, with a grin that could charm his way out of any trouble. In 1883, Teresa gave birth to twin daughters, Caroline and Catherine, and Ben joked that she was trying to give him an entire baseball team. But his joy was absolute, and he took to having 5 children with the same steady enthusiasm he brought to everything else in life. "Remember when you stepped off that stagecoach with Samuel and Sarah?" Ben said one evening when the children were finally all asleep. They were sitting on the porch, as they often did, watching the stars come out. "I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Alone with 2 babies, not knowing what you were going to do but determined to find a way. I thought you were either crazy or the answer to my prayers," Teresa admitted, leaning against his shoulder. "A handsome stranger offering me a job and a home. It seemed too good to be true." "It was the best decision I ever made," Ben said, kissing the top of her head. "Asking you to come work for me. Though honestly, I think I knew even then that I was not just hiring a housekeeper. There was something about you, Teresa, something that called to me." "I fell in love with you so quickly it scared me," Teresa confessed. "I thought I was being disloyal to Robert's memory, but now I understand that love is not a finite resource. I can honor what I had with him while also embracing what I have with you. They are different, but both real." "I am glad you came to that understanding," Ben said softly, because I cannot imagine my life without you anymore. You and our children are everything to me." The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. Samuel took on more responsibility with the cattle as he got older, showing a natural aptitude for ranching. Sarah surprised everyone by developing an interest in the business side of things, keeping meticulous records of expenses and profits that helped Ben make better decisions. Tommy, when he was old enough, proved to be excellent at training horses, with a patience and gentle touch that reminded Teresa of his father. The twins, Caroline and Catherine, were still young but already showing distinct personalities. Caroline bold and outgoing, Catherine quiet and thoughtful. In 1887, when Samuel and Sarah were 10 years old, they asked Ben and Teresa about their biological father. It was a conversation Teresa had been dreading, but Ben handled it with his typical wisdom. "Your father, Robert, was a good man who loved you very much," he told them, sitting them down in the parlor. "He got sick and died before he could see you grow up, and that is a tragedy. But he gave your mother the greatest gifts she could have asked for, which were you too. And when your mother came here with you, I got the privilege of raising you as my own children. I did not give you life, but I have tried my best to give you a good life, and I will always be here for you, no matter what." "You are our real father," Samuel said firmly, his young voice brooking no argument. "You are the one who taught me to ride and to rope cattle and to be a man. Robert may have been our biological father, but you are our dad." Sarah nodded in agreement, tears in her eyes. "We love you, Dad. You are the only father we have ever known." Teresa watched Ben hug both children, saw the emotion on his face, and fell in love with him all over again. He was not just a good man, he was the best man she had ever known. More years passed. The children continued to grow and thrive. Samuel, as he approached his 18th birthday, began talking about expanding the ranch, buying additional land and increasing their herd. He had his father's vision and his mother's practicality, a combination that served him well. Sarah, at 16, had attracted the attention of a young man in town, the son of a shopkeeper, and while Ben grumbled about her growing up too fast, he could not deny that the young man was respectful and hardworking. Tommy, at 13, was all gangly limbs and enthusiasm, throwing himself into everything with boundless energy. The twins, Caroline and Catherine, were 8 now and had just started helping seriously around the ranch, with Caroline already begging to learn to rope and Catherine spending hours in the garden Teresa had planted years ago. On their 10th wedding anniversary in March of 1889, Ben surprised Teresa with a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children in Rosa's capable care. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch and the children for more than a day, and while Teresa worried constantly, she also found herself enjoying the adventure. They stayed in a real hotel, with room service and electric lights, marveling at how different the city was from their rural life. They walked through Golden Gate Park, ate at restaurants where other people did the cooking, and went to see a theatrical production that left them both amazed and exhausted. But their favorite part was simply being alone together, remembering what it was like when they first fell in love. On their last night in the city, as they sat in their hotel room looking out at the lights of San Francisco, Ben took Teresa's hand. "Have I told you lately that you are the love of my life?" he asked. "You show me every day," Teresa said, squeezing his hand, "but I never get tired of hearing it." "I did not know what I was missing until you came into my life," Ben said, his voice serious. "I thought I was content, running the ranch, living alone, but you showed me what real happiness looks like. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just surviving from one day to the next. You gave me everything, Teresa." "You gave me everything too," Teresa said, tears in her eyes. "I was desperate and scared, and you offered me safety and security. But you gave me so much more than that. You gave me love and respect and partnership. You raised my children like they were your own. You built a life with me that I never dreamed was possible. I love you, Benjamin Vance, more than words can say." They held each other as the city lights twinkled below, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful and lasting. They returned to the ranch to find that everything had run smoothly in their absence and that the children had missed them terribly. There were tears and hugs all around, and Teresa realized that this was what mattered most. This family, this home, this life they had created together. The years continued their steady march forward. In 1891, Sarah married her young man, Henry Carlson, in a beautiful ceremony that had Teresa crying throughout and Ben pretending he had something in his eye. The couple built a small house in town, where Henry was taking over his father's store, but they came to the ranch every Sunday for dinner, a tradition that would continue for decades. Samuel, now a young man of 20, surprised no one when he announced his intention to marry Clara Morrison, the sheriff's daughter. Ben gave them a portion of the ranch land as a wedding present, and they built their own house just over the hill, close enough to be part of the daily operations but far enough for privacy. The ranch was now truly a family operation, with Samuel managing the cattle, Ben overseeing everything and working with the horses, and Teresa running the household with help from the girls. Tommy, now 15 and nearly as tall as his father, worked alongside Samuel, learning everything he could. In the winter of 1893, tragedy struck when Miguel passed away after a short illness. The loss hit the family hard, as he had been part of their lives for so many years. But true to form, Ben made sure that Rosa was taken care of, giving her a small house on the ranch property and making sure she would never want for anything. "He was like a father to me after my own father died," Ben said at the funeral, his voice thick with emotion. "He taught me as much about ranching as my father did, and he was always there with wisdom and kindness. We will miss him every day." Carlos, Miguel's son, took over his father's position and life continued. It was the way of things, Teresa reflected, the endless cycle of life and death, joy and sorrow, beginnings and endings. But the joys far outweighed the sorrows. Sarah gave them their first grandchild in 1894, a baby girl named Emma. Watching Ben hold his granddaughter for the first time, seeing the wonder on his face, Teresa was reminded of that day so many years ago when he had held Sarah for the first time, a baby who was not biologically his, but who he had loved from the start. Samuel and Clara followed soon after with a son, Benjamin Jr., called BJ by everyone. And suddenly, Teresa and Ben were not just parents but grandparents, a new chapter in their long story together. The turn of the century came, bringing with it changes both large and small. Electricity reached Sonora, though it would be several more years before it made it out to the ranch. Automobiles started appearing on the streets, strange horseless contraages that spooked the animals and made Ben shake his head in disbelief. But through all the changes, the ranch remained constant, a stable foundation for the family. Tommy married in 1902, bringing his bride Amelia to live in the main house, adding another set of hands and another loving presence. Caroline and Catherine, now 20, were being courted by young men from neighboring ranches, and Teresa suspected there would be more weddings soon. On a warm spring evening in 1903, Teresa and Ben sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the past 25 years. They were both in their late 40s now, with silver threading through their hair and lines on their faces that spoke of years spent laughing and working in the sun. Around them, the ranch hummed with activity. Samuel was in the barn with BJ, teaching him about horses. Sarah was visiting with Emma and her new baby boy, Robert, named in honor of the man who had been her biological father. Tommy and Amelia were working in the garden, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. Caroline and Catherine were inside helping with dinner preparations, their laughter spilling out through the open windows. "We did good, did not we?" Ben said, taking Teresa's hand like he had done 10,000 times before. "We did better than good," Teresa said, looking out at the land they had built their life on, at the family they had created. "We built something lasting, Ben, something that will continue long after we are gone." "I will never forget that day you arrived in Sonora," Ben said softly. "You standing there with those tiny babies, looking so scared but so determined. I did not know it then, but that was the day my real life began." "Mine too," Teresa said, squeezing his hand. "You saved us that day, but I think maybe we saved each other. I gave you a family and you gave us a home. We gave each other a future. Our family just got bigger and better," Ben said, echoing the words he had spoken so many years ago. "And it keeps getting better every day." As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Teresa leaned against her husband's shoulder and counted her blessings. She had come to Sonora desperate and alone, with nothing but 2 babies and a prayer. And she had found everything she never knew she needed: a home, a family, a love that had grown deeper with every passing year. The years that followed brought more grandchildren, more joy, more of the everyday miracles that made up a life well lived. Samuel and Clara had 3 more children. Sarah and Henry had 4. Tommy and Amelia added 5 to the growing family. Caroline married a rancher from the next county and had twins, making Teresa laugh at the continuing tradition. Catherine became a teacher in Sonora and married one of her fellow teachers, bringing a different perspective into the family. In 1910, Teresa and Ben celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends who had become family over the decades. The ranch house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family gatherings, and on special occasions like this, it was filled to bursting with love and noise and life. Samuel stood to make a toast, now a man of 43 with silver in his dark hair and his father's steady presence. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "Dad, you chose to be my father when you did not have to, and you have never once made me feel like anything less than your son. Mom, you brought us here and built this family with strength and grace. Everything good in my life comes from what you two built together." Sarah added her own words, tears streaming down her face. "You showed us what real love looks like. Not just romantic love, though you have plenty of that, but the everyday love of showing up, working hard, taking care of each other and your children. You gave us the best possible example of what a marriage should be." Tommy, Caroline, and Catherine each added their own tributes, and by the end, both Teresa and Ben were crying openly, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. That night, after everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Teresa and Ben walked out to the porch one more time. It had become their place, their sanctuary where they had shared so many important conversations over the years. 31 years, Teresa said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that stagecoach. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "It has been a lifetime," Ben said, his arm around her waist. "The best lifetime I could have asked for. You know, when I was young, I thought success meant having a big ranch, lots of cattle, money in the bank. But you taught me that real success is measured in love, in family, in the difference you make in the lives of the people you care about. You were already a good man when I met you, Teresa said. You just needed someone to share it with. And you needed someone to take care of you and those babies, Ben replied. It was fate, Teresa. It had to be. What were the chances that I would be in town that exact day, at that exact moment, that I would see you and decide to offer you a job instead of just riding past like everyone else did? Divine providence, Teresa said firmly. God knew what we both needed and he brought us together. I have never doubted that. They stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night, crickets chirping, horses settling in the barn, an owl hooting in the distance. The same sounds they had been hearing for over 3 decades, as familiar as breathing. You ever think about Robert? Ben asked suddenly. It was a question he had never asked before, perhaps afraid of the answer. Teresa considered carefully. Sometimes, she said honestly. I think about what his life might have been like if he had lived, what kind of father he might have been to the twins. But I cannot regret how things turned out, Ben. I cannot wish for a different past when it would mean losing what I have with you. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human, Ben said gently. You are allowed to acknowledge that something good came from something tragic. Robert gave you Samuel and Sarah, and that is a gift. But what you and I built together, that is something different, something that grew over time. Both things can be true. I am grateful for my time with Robert because it gave me my first 2 children, Teresa said slowly. But I am more grateful for my time with you because you gave me everything else. A home, a family, a love that has sustained me through everything. You are the love of my life, Benjamin Vance. You always will be. Ben kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 31 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The ranch continued to thrive under the combined efforts of the family. Samuel had become the primary manager, allowing Ben to slow down a bit, though he still worked every day because he could not imagine doing anything else. Teresa had handed over most of the household management to Amelia and the younger women, but she still presided over the kitchen during family gatherings, refusing to relinquish control of her recipes. In 1915, the world was changing rapidly. War had broken out in Europe, and while America had not yet joined the fight, everyone knew it was coming. The ranch, so remote from the concerns of the wider world, suddenly felt like a precious sanctuary. Samuel, at 48, was too old to fight if war came, but some of the grandsons were the right age, and Teresa found herself praying fervently that the conflict would end before they were called upon. She had built this family with so much love and effort. The thought of losing any of them to war was unbearable. But for now, they were safe and together. The ranch had weathered droughts and hard winters, economic ups and downs, personal tragedies and triumphs. It had become more than just a piece of land. It was a legacy, a testament to what could be built when 2 people loved each other and worked together toward a common goal. One autumn morning in 1918, as Teresa was making breakfast, she heard a commotion outside. Hurrying to the porch, she saw Ben on the ground, Samuel kneeling beside him. Her heart seized with terror as she ran to them. "What happened?" she demanded, dropping down beside her husband. "I just got a little dizzy," Ben said, trying to wave off their concern. "I am fine." But he was not fine. Over the next few days, despite his protests, Teresa made him see the doctor in town. The diagnosis was heart problems, nothing that could be fixed, but something that could be managed with rest and less stress. "You have to slow down," Teresa told him firmly when they returned to the ranch. "No more working from dawn to dusk. Samuel and Tommy and the others can handle things." "Teresa, I have worked this ranch for 40 years, Ben protested. I cannot just stop. You can and you will, she said, her voice brooking no argument. I did not spend 39 years building a life with you just to lose you because you were too stubborn to rest. You are going to take it easy, Benjamin Vance, even if I have to tie you to the porch chair. Despite his grumbling, Ben did slow down. He still went out to the barn every day, still checked on the horses, still offered advice to Samuel and the others. But he stopped doing the heavy physical labor, and he came in for afternoon rests, and he let Teresa fuss over him without too much complaint. In truth, he found that he enjoyed having more time with her. They had been so busy over the years, raising children and running the ranch, that they had not had much time just for the two of them. Now they took walks in the evening, holding hands like young sweethearts. They sat on the porch and watched the grandchildren play. They talked about their life together, remembering all the moments that had brought them to this place. I have no regrets, Ben told her one evening. Not a single one. Everything I have done, every choice I have made since the day I met you has been exactly right. I have one regret, Teresa admitted. Ben looked at her in surprise. What is that? That I did not tell you I loved you sooner, she said softly. I wasted months being afraid, worrying about what people would think, when I could have been loving you openly from the start. We had time enough, Ben said, pulling her close. We had years and years, Teresa. A whole lifetime of love. That is more than most people ever get. In 1920, they celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary with a party even bigger than the one for their 30th. The ranch was overrun with children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. 4 generations of the family Ben and Teresa had started, all gathered together. Samuel and Sarah, now in their early 50s, had become the leaders of the next generation, managing their respective families and businesses with the same steady wisdom their parents had shown. Tommy, still working the ranch at 45, had proven to be an excellent horse trainer, and their horses were sought after throughout California. Caroline and Catherine, both in their late 30s, had built strong families of their own, visiting often and keeping the connection to the ranch strong. As Teresa looked around at all the faces, some familiar, some belonging to grandchildren and great-grandchildren she was still getting to know, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. From that desperate moment stepping off the stagecoach with 2 babies, to this, a family that stretched across generations and filled a house with love and laughter. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. That night, Ben had another dizzy spell, and this time Teresa saw the fear in his eyes that he tried to hide. She helped him to bed and lay beside him, holding his hand in the darkness. "I am not ready to leave you," he whispered. "Then do not," she said fiercely. "You stay right here with me, Benjamin Vance. We still have more living to do." He squeezed her hand. "Every day with you has been a gift, Teresa. Even if tomorrow is my last day, I will still be the luckiest man who ever lived." "No talk of last days," Teresa said firmly. "We are going to grow old together, you and me. We are going to meet more great-grandchildren and see this ranch continue to grow. We are going to sit on that porch and watch the sunset 1,000 more times." 1,000 more times, Ben agreed, and though his voice was weak, his grip on her hand was strong, but mortality could not be denied forever. In the spring of 1923, Ben's health took a serious turn. The doctor was grave when he spoke to Teresa and the children, explaining that his heart was simply wearing out. There was nothing more they could do except keep him comfortable. Teresa refused to accept defeat. She moved her chair into their bedroom so she could be with him constantly. She read to him, talked to him about their life together, held his hand through the pain. The children visited constantly, each wanting time with their father, telling him how much he meant to them. On a warm afternoon in May, with Teresa sitting beside him and the sound of grandchildren playing outside drifting through the open window, Ben opened his eyes and looked at her with perfect clarity. "You remember what I said the day you arrived?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our family just got bigger and better," Teresa said, tears streaming down her face. "It was true then, and it is true now," Ben said, managing a smile. "Look what we built, Teresa. Look at all that love out there. That is our legacy. Not the ranch, not the money, but the love." "You are my legacy," Teresa said, clutching his hand. "You and our family, you are everything, Ben." "I love you," he said softly. "From that first day to this last one, you have been the best thing that ever happened to me." "I love you too," Teresa whispered. "Always and forever." Ben closed his eyes then, that small smile still on his face, and quietly slipped away. Teresa felt the moment his spirit left, felt the stillness that replaced his presence, and she bent over his body and wept like she had never wept before. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over California to pay their respects to Ben Vance, a man who had been respected and loved by all who knew him. Teresa stood between Samuel and Sarah, her children supporting her as she had supported them so many times, and listened to person after person talk about Ben's kindness, his integrity, his generosity. "He was a good man," Sheriff Morrison's son, who had taken over his father's position, said simply. "The kind of man this world needs more of." In the weeks that followed, Teresa moved through her grief in a fog. The house felt empty without Ben, even though it was still filled with family. She found herself reaching for him in the night, only to remember he was gone. She would see something during the day and think, "I must tell Ben about this," before the reality crashed over her again. But slowly, with the support of her children and grandchildren, she began to heal. She realized that Ben would not want her to spend the rest of her life mourning. He would want her to live, to enjoy the family they had built together, to find joy in the simple moments. She started spending more time with the great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their great-grandfather. She worked in the garden that Catherine had expanded over the years. She sat on the porch, in the chair next to Ben's empty one, and watched the sunsets he had loved so much. Samuel came to visit her one evening about 6 months after Ben's death. He sat in his father's chair, and Teresa felt a pang at seeing someone else there, but also a sense of rightness. This was as it should be, the next generation taking their place. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something," Samuel said. "Clara and I have been thinking. This house is too big for you to be rattling around in by yourself. Why do not you move in with us? We have plenty of room, and you would still be right here on the ranch." Teresa considered his offer carefully. It was tempting to accept, to let herself be taken care of, to not have to maintain this big house alone. But this was the house she had shared with Ben, the place where they had raised their family, the location of so many memories. "I appreciate the offer, Samuel, truly, but this is my home. Your father and I built our life here, and I am not ready to leave it. Maybe someday when I am older and cannot manage on my own. But for now, I want to stay here in the place where I was happiest." Samuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I thought you might say that. But the offer stands whenever you need it." Teresa lived on in the ranch house for many more years. She saw her grandchildren grow up and have children of their own. She saw the ranch continue to prosper under Samuel's management, and later under his son BJ's leadership. She saw automobiles replace horses on the roads, electricity come to the ranch, the world change in ways both wonderful and terrible. But through all the changes, she remained constant, the matriarch of the family Ben and she had created. She told stories of the old days to anyone who would listen, making sure that the younger generations knew where they came from, understood the sacrifices and love that had built their legacy. On a crisp autumn morning in 1945, at the age of 89, Teresa Foster Vance passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Ben for so many years. She was surrounded by family even in death, with her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren filling the house one last time. They buried her next to Ben in the family cemetery on the ranch with a simple headstone that read, Teresa Foster Vance, 1856–1945, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She built a family with love. At the funeral, Samuel, now in his late 70s himself, stood to speak about his mother. She came here with nothing but hope and determination and 2 babies in her arms. She could have given up so many times, but she never did. She chose to keep fighting, keep loving, keep building. And because of her strength, all of us are here today. Our family, our legacy, everything we have, it all started with her courage and Dad's kindness on that day in September of 1878. They built something beautiful together, something that will continue for generations to come. And it did continue. The ranch stayed in the family, passing down through the generations. Samuel's children and grandchildren worked it, maintained it, loved it the way Ben and Teresa had loved it. The house was eventually added onto even more, with wings and extensions to accommodate the ever-growing family gatherings. In the front parlor, in a place of honor, hung 2 portraits. One of Ben, strong and steady with warmth in his eyes, and one of Teresa, beautiful and determined with love in her smile. Between them hung a photograph taken at their 41st anniversary, showing them together on the porch, holding hands, looking at each other with the kind of love that transcends time. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Teresa had first arrived in Sonora, the family gathered to tell the story again. The story of how their family began with a desperate woman, 2 tiny babies, and a cowboy who saw them and said, "Our family just got bigger and better." The story of how love, given freely and nurtured carefully, could build something that lasted beyond lifetimes. The story of 2 people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and created a legacy of love that would echo through the ages.